Hi, my name is Professor Adam Winstock. I'm a consultant psychiatrist and addiction medicine specialist. I'm also founder of the Global Drug Survey. In this video, I want to talk about why most people who are alcohol dependent don't think they are or don't know they are. And I think one of the biggest reasons is that there's a beautiful stereotype about what someone is or who someone is who's alcohol dependent. And it's typically homeless people or people who wake up in the morning are shaking and sweating. And if people aren't doing that, they go, well, then my drinking's just fine. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. In fact, there's a whole bunch of things about alcohol dependence that, as a doctor, are hugely depressing. The first thing is that actually people with alcohol dependence are the least treated group of people with a psychiatric disorder in the world. About 80% of people with schizophrenia are in treatment. For alcohol dependence, it's somewhere between 6 and 10%. And that's largely because most people don't know they're dependent, because they just think dependence is waking up, shaking and sweating and needing a drink in the morning. And that's just a minority of people. So the majority of people out there who are alcohol dependent are what I think society calls functioning alcoholics. There is no clinical diagnosis of a functional alcoholic. I'm not quite sure what it means. I guess it means they still have a job, they still have a house, they maybe still have a family. But I bet you anything, there's a whole bunch of things in that person's life that aren't as great as they could be. As a doctor, the way you diagnose alcohol dependence is by asking someone a bunch of questions and seeing what the responses are. The things that you're looking for are things like loss of control. So, if I go out to the pub and I say I'm going to have 2 pints, I can go to a pub and I can just have 2 pints. If you're alcohol dependent, you go to the pub and you say, I'm going to go home after just 1 beer, but in fact you lose control. Loss of control is about drinking more alcohol on a day that you drink and drinking more drinking days than you want. So, after loss of control, the second thing is a subjective sense of craving, a compulsion to drink. People feeling that as soon as they come home or they walk into an environment, they have to consume alcohol. So both loss of control and a compulsion to drink are very behavioural things. What we've also got is the idea that people continuing to drink despite problems that alcohol is causing in their personal, emotional, physical or social life. For most people, if you go out and you drink too much and you go and see your doctor and the doctor says, you've got a stomach ulcer, you need to drink less, most people stop drinking. For people who are alcohol dependent, that negative consequence is not sufficient for them to reduce or cut back down their drinking. As people become alcohol dependent, what they also do is they notice that alcohol becomes more and more important to their life. It becomes central to their life. It's the primacy of drinking. Drinking becomes more important and replaces other things that you used to find pleasure from. And so we call that neglecting other activities unrelated to alcohol. So you no longer go to particular kind of sporting activities because there's no alcohol there. You don't go to the cinema, there's no booze there. You will go to places where there is alcohol. The other thing that we see, and which most people would consider as a benchmark of alcohol dependence, is people develop tolerance. Tolerance means needing to take more of that drug in order to get the same effect, or getting less of an effect when you drink the same amount. And that's very closely linked to physical withdrawal. Now, I just want to talk about tolerance a bit more before we talk about withdrawal. Tolerance is an adaptive mechanism that your body puts in place to protect you from excessive levels of alcohol consumption. And it does that, particularly for alcohol, by your liver getting bigger, producing more enzymes in order to break the alcohol down faster. It also does that at a brain level by altering receptor sensitivity. Tolerance and its development is really adaptive. Where it becomes a problem is where people stop drinking. When people who are dependent upon alcohol stop drinking, all of those adaptive mechanisms become maladaptive, and your body then responds by going into withdrawal. So being alcohol dependent basically means having lost control over your drinking. Drinking becomes more important than anything else. You're now drinking more than you want to despite problems. You're developing tolerance. And for some people, perhaps about 50%, if they stop drinking, they develop withdrawal. We'll talk about withdrawal in a couple of videos. But the other thing that is a hallmark of people who have alcohol dependence is once they stop drinking, and if they have a period of time without alcohol, when they return to any level of alcohol consumption, they return almost instantaneously back to dependent drinking. And that's perhaps the hardest challenge for people with alcohol dependence to accept, is that I think for most people who are alcohol dependent, once you are dependent upon alcohol, you cannot return to consuming alcohol normally. It's not true for everyone, but if you ask most people in my business, the advice we would give most people who've been alcohol dependent, and this would be supported by mutual aid organisations such as Alcoholics Anonymous, is that really for you, the safest level of alcohol consumption is never to drink again. And we'll talk about how you can deal with that sense of loss, it's almost bereavement, by not being able to return to drinking. But I guess the important thing is alcohol dependence is a psychiatric diagnosis. It's based on diagnostic criteria. Now it's ICD-11 or DSM-5. And based on those findings, we can say whether or not you're alcohol dependent. Now, different diagnostic criteria, for example, such as DSM-5, will talk about mild, moderate, and severe dependence. ICD doesn't really talk about that, but we'll talk about dependence with and without physical withdrawal. And the bit I want to end up on is this. You can be alcohol dependent without ever experiencing alcohol withdrawal symptoms at all. You can be alcohol dependent if you go out on a Thursday and Friday night and get drunk. But as a result of getting drunk on Thursday and Friday, you have arguments with your wife, you turn up late for work, you find you develop physical health conditions, and you also find that actually during those 2 days you need to drink an inordinate amount of alcohol. And what you also find is that when you go to the pub on a Thursday, you can't wait to get drinking. You're exhibiting some tolerance, you're exhibiting a compulsion to drink, you're continuing to drink despite problems. And the other thing is that you've not been able to control your drinking despite all these dreadful things that are happening. You're not getting withdrawal, but you're alcohol dependent. And there's lots of people out there who will come back from work and open up half a bottle of wine every day. Maybe on a Friday and Saturday they'll have a bottle of wine. They never wake up in the morning shaking and sweating. They don't ever get hangovers. No one ever tells them there's a problem. But they know inside their head they need that drink. And they know that if they want to try and go without drinking for a day, it's going to be hard. In the next video, I'm going to talk about some of the other ways that we might find out whether or not you're physically dependent and what being physically dependent and having alcohol withdrawal means for you, your clinician, and your treatment.